That was fun. Those guys, Aaron FaceTimed me when Verse was in the corner, still sucking some wind. He said, "Man, you know what I respect though is that Jared ended up following through and going over there, and it was fun. I got Jared pretty good last week where I faked like Aaron was here. So how many guys have seen what's going on between Jared and Aaron? A lot of guys raise their hand. I said, "Like, welcome Aaron Donald." In Verse, he sits like in the front left. He looked like he was going to shit himself. It was great though. But I loved it that they went over there. I know that it was all good and fun, but Aaron still takes pretty good care of himself. I texted Jared that I said, "I love it that you went over there." He said, "Yeah, I'm not messing with legends anymore." So I thought that was
with Aaron Donald, with these players to be able to have the connectivity and be able to, they can go to him and he can still have the pathway to come here as well.
Yeah, it's amazing, Nick. And what's cool is because he still is so present and he still is very close by and still so involved with the organization. We use him as references all the time, and it's a lot easier now that he's not in the building to just talk about a lot of the things that he did that are exactly in alignment with what we want to be about. And he really, I think he feels the investment the organization's made in him, and he gives it back. And there's a lot of, there's so much benefit from that in terms of just the relationship that we have, the relationship he has with the Rams, and the respect and reverence that a lot of guys have for him. I was even talking to Fisk last week, and I think a lot of guys, I wish I got a chance to be able to play with him. Well, Kobe Turner is always sharing some really cool stories, and so, he's very present, and it'll be cool to be able to honor him for the Tampa game as well, which is well earned and well deserved. A better bobblehead than mine.
You talk about Kobe Durant. Obviously, he was honored with the Black College Football Award. What does that mean just to have a player of his caliber be on this team, not just as a football player, but as a person as well?
Yeah, it is always about the person first, and I think, I said it before, Chris Peterson got a chance to come out here, better people make better players, and, he's continuously gotten better. He works at it. You talk about the growth mindset, the ability to understand how do I apply a lot of these things that we're talking about as I'm accumulating experience and then using those reps to bank them the right way. And so really been really pleased with him. He's a great human first and foremost, and he is just continuing to ascend as a player, and I think his best ball is ahead. Yeah, the way he sees the game, Jordan, is pretty impressive. He sees the game through a quarterback lens, and he's got so many experiences and really understands it from an all-22 perspective. And so, a lot of it is asking questions about things that maybe I've seen over the course of his career, or how do we apply it, or how is it similar to maybe things I've seen him do. But he's, he loves football. There's a consistent passion. There's a real understanding of, how it all kind of fits together, the spacing, timing, rhythm. And so, and then, talk about other stuff outside of football, but the way that his mind works, I've really enjoyed being able to learn from him as well.
I saw the video of you earlier this spring showing the team in a meeting, Phil and Devontae, and you were very excited about that. What was the decision to do that, and what do you think the team does?
That's what we do for all of our guys. I think the important thing is to authentically, engineer opportunities to be able to build people up. And, we do that when we bring, our rookies in, we do that when we bring in new free agents, just to be able to say, okay, hey, here's a cool way of being able to welcome guys. It's something that, Carter Crutchfield has been really, influential in a lot of the things that we do in the team meetings. And, I'd be lost without him. But, Devontae was an easy one to be able to put together because he's got a lot of cool things to be able to draw on. But that's kind of a consistent theme that we try to do for new guys. Puna had some fun ones. It was cool to be able to, honor Coleman and Nate Landman and those guys as well.
Alexander, would you guys have interest in possibly pursuing him, and if so, how does that impact maybe a possible pursuit or continuing pursuit of Jalen Ramsey?
We haven't had a lot of those discussions, as far as, and it's kind of similar. There's so many layers to the Jalen conversation. Obviously with Jair, a lot of respect for him as a player. Haven't talked about those types of things. Our main focus is this will really represent our last OTA day. So we've kind of just been focused on our group. Les and I have had some dialogue and discussions as it relates to the Jalen thing, but there's really no news to report on. And with Jair, just nothing but respect for the player, but I don't know if that's a direction that we would go. Kyron, go ahead.
You guys made any progress on talking about
Yeah, there's a lot of discussions that are consistently going on. Like I said, Drew has been, great to be able to work with, and those conversations go back to even before. But really, when you look at the league meetings and then just some of the back and forth that exists, Matthew Sharon's been outstanding in a lot of the communication as it relates to Drew, and I feel like it's been really positive. And what I love is that Kyron's been here, been leading, been doing exactly what Kyron does, and so been pleased. And we'll see if there's an opportunity to be able to land that plane. But good progress, but nothing to report as far as any deal.
Speaking of planes, so you guys have the flight to Hawaii, the trip to Hawaii coming up for mini camp. I assume you have to know like who's going to make it and who's not by now
Yeah.
because of the flight situation. Do you expect full attendance at mini camp?
Oh yeah, and if not, it's because it's been an excused absence where they're like, because here's the reality. What a cool opportunity that we've got to be able to partner up with Maui. A lot of similar things that that community has kind of gone through, and obviously an opportunity to be able to extend your kind of brand reach, if you will. As far as the amount of football, this is about being able to connect. We'll do a couple things, like more like a phase 2 day. Any 11-on-11 stuff, that's not going to be existent. So there's going to be a couple people that had some prior commitments, whether it's somebody's wedding or something with their family, that they'll have excused absences, but everybody will be accounted for as it relates to next week.
Sean, with as much as you've seen Devontae Adams before he came here with tape and playing against him, is there anything that's jumped out since he came here that surprised you in any way, or wow, that's higher than I thought?
I think it more confirms. I think what's been cool is just getting to know the person. What makes him tick. The way that he's played the game, you could always see how smart and cerebral, and obviously the ability to be able to work edges, separate, play at such a high level. But I think getting to know the person, what are some of his passions, and then being able to hear kind of like what Jordan was asking earlier, just the way that he sees the game. I would have assumed that it was like that, but then you're even more impressed with just the depth of knowledge. And you can see when the game's important to people, they use those reps that they've accumulated over time to draw on those experiences and apply them in the right ways. And those special players have an ability to be able to do that. And he is certainly one of those guys.
What have you seen with him and Matthew as two very veteran guys trying to still connect?
With that, I think it's two veteran guys, and what I think is really cool to be able to witness is the respect that you can feel they have for one another, and wanted to make sure that, hey, how can we accelerate this while also understand, what a unique thing it is to develop a rapport, especially on some of the different types of routes that he'll have the ability to run in our offense. And Matthew's got such a great way of being able to connect and communicate, and it's the same thing with Devontae. And so those guys have such a high level of understanding of what they want, and I think the best thing that we can seek out as coaches is player ownership. So sometimes it's fun to just be able to kind of be a fly on the wall and hear their dialogue as they're kind of going over a previous set of plays or some different things that inevitably come up day in and day out. So it's been cool to watch.
It seems like Emmanuel Forrest has pulled up a little bit this offseason. What have you seen from him so far, and do you think that's helped him at all?
Yeah, I think yes. Justin Lovett and his group do such a great job. Forbes is bulking up, looking good. But he's really, I think what's been awesome is, and we talked about this at the very beginning, having an understanding of what we're trying to get done. He comes in the middle of the year, and you can see I really liked his demeanor. I thought he did a good job in the Seattle game when he played last year, but really understanding some of the things that Aubrey is teaching him and how do I apply it in these team settings. He's got great movement. He's got a really good concept trigger. I mean, you can see the ball production where he's doing things that had never been done before at the collegiate level in terms of being able to get your hands on the ball and then go score. So I've really been pleased with him. He's been there's been a lot of positive guys that have really stood out or really kind of taken their game to another level, and I'm looking forward to seeing once we put the pads on and get into some of the preseason games. Let's continue to apply that. But been really pleased with Emmanuel, and he's done a great job.
But what, if anything, have you observed from them collectively in terms of bonding, in terms of working together?
Yeah, you know what I think is cool, Gary, is when you're going through similar experiences, you're staying in the hotel, a lot of things are new for guys. There's that shared experience of understanding what we're going through. They're able to lean on one another. What I think's been great is we've really tried to lean into the types of people where there's different personalities, but there still are core values or experiences that these guys have gone through that have tested their mental fortitude, their resilience, a lot of the things that you've heard us talk about over the last couple of years. I think we've really leaned into that. And so I think the most important thing is, as a team, how do we come together? How do we really lean on one another? But when you are going through a similar experience, it's been fun to be able to watch those guys kind of mature and be able to grow together, if you will. It still is the early parts, and then Aubrey and Casey Africano, but like Aubrey, as the assistant head coach, he's been leading a lot of the messaging and just some of these meetings, and watching him connect and guys being able to open up has been really cool to kind of be able to witness, and it's a huge credit to him. But really enjoy just the caliber of people we have in our locker room. I think that's one of the things that I would hope you guys would feel, even as it relates to just doing your job. And these are quality young men. They're respectful. They understand that you guys are trying to be able to do a job, and they're all different personalities, but man, they make up a pretty cool opportunity for us to be able to bring it together and see what that looks like this coming fall.
There's some history of a player that maybe has had blown their confidence in another team, or maybe there's been a release. You guys have been playing your sign in free agency, thinking of Leonard Floyd, for
Sure.
example, Emmanuel Forbes, and then that player builds back up here. Where do you start when a player is coming in and you're mentoring with very public, I don't want to say personal disappointment, and then coming here?
Well, that's a really good question. I think all organizations would hope to be able to create an atmosphere and environment that's conducive for them reaching and realizing their highest potential. I think the first thing I would say is you got to ask yourself questions, understand where they're coming from. I think so often as coaches, and we talk about it all the time, you feel a responsibility to correct. So, all right, well, what is that ratio? How often are you calling guys up for what they're doing right? How often are we cognizant of, hey, we're going to be demanding, but we're never demeaning or disrespectful? What does it look like to create and to cultivate an atmosphere and environment that does build people up while being challenging, understanding that a lot of these things are skills that you can lean into inevitably at any, in some time frame. You're going to go through a storm. We talk about it a lot. Hey, you're either in it, you're going to go back into it, or you're just coming out of it. And it's usually one of those three things. And the separator is how you're able to handle that. But the best part about football is we're all in this together. It's the greatest team sport that there is. And so I think it's all about meeting people where they are and then trying to authentically build them back up while knowing that there's inevitably a lot of hard things that we're doing, like talking over Matthew, ripping the ball against the wall right now. See if you can break the wall.
When whoever was from their team putting Hawaii together and approached you about it, what was your reaction to it? And was there anything decisions you had to make about, I guess, fitting it to the football side
Yeah.
of this offseason?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for what the intent is. The people that asked me about it, they were smart about the timing of when they asked me about this stuff when I was getting to it. But it is a really cool opportunity. To most importantly, I mean, you just talk about some of the similarities of what the LA community's gone through, what the Maui community's gone through. A chance to be able to, broaden the reach. And then, there's going to be a lot of people that are excited to see our players. And so what I do think we have is a lot of guys that understand, what a blessing it is to have this platform, to be a mentor, and to really, how do you move and how do you handle yourself, and how do you make sure that, this is a blessing, it's never a burden, and our guys really understand the importance of using that the right way. And I think this would be a great chance for us to be able to, bring families, do some fun stuff, to be able to connect, and then also be able to give back to the community. I mean, even, last week, Gift Smith comes over to me, and, are there going to be opportunities for like Habitat for Humanity? Can you do that with the families? And you just have a lot of cool people that have a heart for others, and I think that becomes contagious in the right ways. And when you do good things, I feel like that inevitably comes back to you, and you never regret doing the right thing and using these blessings for the right reasons. I think that's what this trip represents. Before it, I'm not going to even answer that. A long time ago.
Hey Sean, last month,
What's up, man? Good to see you.
how's it going? Good to see you too. Last month the league canceled the accelerator program to make it better or to tweak it to improve it. But for you, what are some thoughts or takeaways that you could maybe help the league or give some advice to improve that?
Well, I think the intentions are all about, how do you really, what is the intent? To provide opportunities and educated experiences to be able to help better prepare, people for, upward mobility. And so I think the intent, and it's all in the right place, and you've seen really good progress in that regard. I think it's really just about, all right, hey, how do we make sure that you're setting up, situations and circumstances where people are around others that, you know, are willing to be able to share their experiences, are able to ask the questions, where there's that safety and equity built up, and that willingness to be able to share. You know, we're in such a competitive environment, but I think those things are really cool ops to be able to make connections, to be able to learn from people that have maybe gone through some of the experiences that you want to be able to get a chance to be able to go through. And you know, and I think there's been a lot of guys that have been a part of that program here that have really used it for the benefits of, you know, making authentic connections, learning based on, you know, maybe some of the things that you haven't necessarily been exposed to, and then when they get their op, they're ready to go shine. And I think it's a really cool thing, and I know when they bring it back, it'll be better than ever. Okay?